نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and welcome again to another episode of Siratu Khatim al-Nabiyyin, the biography of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the last episode we discussed in quite detail the tribe of Quraysh, the tribe from which Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was from, its source, Nadr ibn Kinana, or his great-grandson Quraysh himself. We had the various topics that we discussed. Where did the word come from? What does it derived? I hope you enjoy that one, and we will carry on now, because we did leave you last episode discussing this particular point of the importance of the Kaaba and how it was perceived by people within Arabia, irrespective of religion or political affiliation. And it's this particular Kaaba itself which we're going to now give some attention to, because we're going to talk about how it's passed hands away from the Khuza'a tribe, which I hope you can remember, and I won't repeat here again. I hope you can get access to the earlier episodes and you can maybe watch it again just to refamiliarize yourself with how Khuza'a took hold. But it was Quraysh now that's going to start to have sway and control things. It mentions, the historians mention that Qusay's mother was married to Rabi'a ibn Haram of Udra, and he took her and her son to his own country. Later, when the young man grew up, Qusay came back to Makkah and he married a young girl called Huba, and she was the daughter of the chief of the Khuza'a. So we're seeing now how the chieftain's daughters married this man early in one of the early stages. And it says here that Khuza'a, they said that Hulayl had entrusted the guardianship of the house, the Kaaba, to Qusay because of the large family Qusay had with his daughter. You realize that this family, remember, level 1 family, is going to be quite a large family. Clearly it's going to, in those days, the family size determined power. So as a result, they're the best people to be entrusted. Out of all my children, I will entrust them with this family. So he was obviously giving it to his daughter, which meant by giving it to his son-in-law as well. And this is how then Qusay ibn Kilab, who was a Qurayshi, took some authority over there. And when he handed it to him, Hulayl also told him, "You have more right to it than I do." And this is the account which we've heard from, or has been the historians Ibn Ishaq mentions, that was heard from Khuza'a. And this is how they took hold of the access to the Kaaba. And this was quite an important step because this authority that this would bring about, as I will describe to you, you will see it brought about a great level of strength and a great level of power to the tribe of Quraysh over the rest of the people. So it's discussed amongst the historians that when these individuals, when Qusay took this honor, he obviously had the opportunity now to carry some sway in political circles as well. Because having this, as I said to you, and I know I've probably repeated this many times now, is the Kaaba held was held in high esteem amongst the mushrikeen, the polytheists who had come before, who were living before Islam. So they went with this in mind. What we saw was Qusay was the first of the Banu Ka'ab who took this a new role of as kingship as well. So he developed it because in those days there was very little kings amongst the Arabs. Arabs were really run along tribal lines, and they had a tribal leader, and it was the tribal leader who would control the tribes, and then they would have sort of confederations of tribes. Sort of the sort of macro coming together of various tribes, sort of intertribal ties and relationships in order to have more power and authority, because it was always about power and authority. But Qusay, once he had taken guardianship of the Kaaba, he realized that this was an opportunity which had been missed by many before, which was that as long as I had the authority and guardianship over the Kaaba, then in essence I had keys to Mecca, because the Kaaba controlled everything. And whoever had control of the Kaaba, by extension, could control Makkah and those who resided in it. So he brought his people from their various dwellings in their various areas, and he said, "Look, move back into Makkah, reside in Makkah, I'm already there, I have control, I have authority, and start living in Mecca. And I will act as your leader, which seems to make sense because at the end of the day, I'm already in charge. And as he did that, kind of automatically, the Meccans also accepted him as their leader. And he became not just a leader, though, he became a king. He became seen as separate from his people. And this is the status he'd reached. So Qusay was the first of, as I mentioned, Banu Ka'b, who became the king. And he was obeyed by his people as such. And with this, he had the rights of hijaba, he had the rights of saqaya, he had the rights of rifada, and he had the nadwa and the liwa. And what this means here is, respectively, is he had the guardianship, the hijaba over the house. He had the provision, the siqaya, he had the provision of water for the pilgrims. He also had the provision of food for them. He resided over the assemblies, the meetings that took place. And he was the one that would issue any banners that would be carried by the various tribes. So you can see that he really took this role, and he took it to the next level. People up until that time had restricted themselves just to having the authority over the Kaaba and having some limited authority elsewhere. But they just saw it as a duty, as a responsibility. Here we can see that Qusay didn't necessarily see it as a responsibility, as a duty. He saw an opportunity, as we've seen so far with the Quraysh. The Quraysh were a people who saw opportunities, and they seized those opportunities, and they gobbled up, as the word Quraysh comes from whatever was around, and used that and took advantage of that situation. So when he had that, well, he wasn't going to necessarily keep all those various, because it was an honor as well to be providing water for the pilgrims. It was an honor to sit in charge of assemblies of the people of Mecca and decide on matters. It was an honor to be producing the banners for the various tribes for war. These were not sort of, and looking after the Kaaba, well, that requires no explanation in terms of the honor there. So what he did was he sort of, the honors that he did, he decided to divide them up. He decided to divide up Mecca. So he had a different kind of mindset now in terms of how he was going to govern Mecca. Nobody had really taken that responsibility. Things just happened. There was no one sort of planning. There was nobody in charge. There was nobody deciding on a holistic level as to what's going to happen in Mecca. So what he did was he divided up Mecca amongst his people into various quarters, and he settled each family of the Quraysh into their dwelling. So in each quarter was his family, and he knew that they would always support him and they would always trust him, and therefore in any uprising or anybody challenging his authority could easily be put to rest. And is in a way, it might look like from the outset that he's sort of taking advantage of this situation, and he's arguably benefiting from it personally, and his family members are benefiting from it. But it wasn't just him that was benefiting, because when you start to get some kind of authority in place, the thing which comes quite quickly is law and order. Because there's somebody who's in charge, there's somebody who we are accountable to. And due to this accountability, due to this justice, this law and order, what we began to see, or what was noticed in Mecca, is that justice started to return. The Quraysh settled in their dwellings, and we saw that the Khuza'a had realized what had happened. They realized that they'd just absolutely lost all the power that they had originally as a tribe. They saw how the Quraysh, in this case Qusay ibn Kilab, had taken it from just being a responsibility, a duty, kind of low profile, but still quite an honor, but he'd taken it to something else. And there was no chance really now, because of what Qusay ibn Kilab was offering for the people, that the people would ever want to change and go back to the old ways. So that was basically the nail in the coffin for Khuza'a to be able to ever step up to that again. But what they did do was, obviously, what in terms of the religious worship, in terms of the idol worship that was going on, they did not change that. So the Quraysh continued those practices which had been brought about by the tribe of Khuza'a. So we saw, for instance, the worshipping of idols still carrying on, the way they were set up around the Kaaba, people being permitted to sacrifice to them, pray near them, and even begging them for items and for things. So we see these various people being settled, but not only were they settled in the sort of inner area of Mecca, they were also settled in the sort of outer areas, in the higher lands of Mecca as well. So eventually they became called the plains of Quraysh or the highlands of Quraysh. And with this, Qusay ibn Kilab was building more and more authority, and he was becoming more and more powerful, because being the guardian and the keeper of the Kaaba and the one who gives out the banners, he not only for war, he not only was controlling the affairs within the city, sort of like home affairs, he was also dealing with foreign policy and foreign affairs as well. So in essence, he had become a king. But he wasn't, as we've already seen, he wasn't just a king that was out for power. He was also a very smart man, a very intelligent man, and what he wanted to do was establish some kind of peace. He wanted to establish some order. So what he did was he constructed a building, and this building that he constructed was to prevent violence between tribes and resolve disputes amicably. And he called this the Darul Nadwa. And this Darul Nadwa was a place where people could go, where they had their disputes and be heard and listened to, and then obviously resolve them verbally, even though things may get hot sometimes, without having to resort to bloodshed and violence. And this word Darul Nadwa means the assembly house. It means the house where people gather. And this is, as I mentioned to you, they would come and discuss things. But once it became an opportunity for people to discuss things, it also carried out other responsibilities. So marriage contracts were carried out there first. Any other large business contracts were conducted there first. And so you're starting to see that this became a sort of a social institute which had the backing of the authority as well, in which the people could see the benefits of its existence, and also see the benefits that Qusay ibn Kilab, by extension the tribe of Quraysh, had brought to Mecca. The door of this building was facing Masjid al-Haram, and later this door was owned by Hakim ibn Hizam after belonging to Banu Abdul Dar, and he sold it during the time of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, this particular door. And he was criticized for that, for saying that you've basically sold your honor. And with this providing of water and providing of drink, we can see that the people would prefer to drink from those pots and pots and vessels which were his personally, and they would like to utilize that, and the pilgrims would come for that. In this time, obviously, in this time that we're referring to, the Zamzam well had been obliterated, and it returned to back as to the way it was before the Jurham tribe had arrived, and people had forgotten about it as to where it was and where it was located. And it's saying that Qusay was the first person then to institute lighting a fire at Muzdalifah to guide people coming there from Arafat. So he's starting to see that he had much use as well beyond his own personal gains. So his leadership brought greatness to the people around them. And there's a statement that Ibn Ishaq mentions that Qusay had imposed on his people, the rifada, which I've already mentioned means providing food for the pilgrims during the pilgrimage. And he's reported to have said the following. He said, "O people of Quraysh, you are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's neighbors and the inhabitants of Makkah and of all the holy places. The pilgrims are Allah's guests and visitors to his house. They have full right to hospitality. So provide food and drink for them during these days until they depart from you." And so they did. Each year people would set aside a portion of their wealth as a tribute. They would pay him, and he would use it to provide food for the people during the days they were at Mina. And the practice was followed at his commands even during the times of Jahiliyyah, and it was passed on up to the present. And in fact, it is the time the Sultan would provide for people at Mina each year until the pilgrimage ends. We even see it to this day. The custodian of the two holy mosques, as you'll see, wherever you go whilst you're traveling in Saudi Arabia during the time of Hajj, and even in the time of Umrah, you will see every now and then your bus, depending on where it's going, will pull up. A few chaps will get inside and they'll give you little treat boxes, and when you look inside your box of treat, you'll have biscuits in there, maybe a carton of milk, some juice, something else, all piled in, and they give that free. You ask for more, they'll give you more. and you'll see that. Then you go somewhere else. When you're at Mina, they'll have little parcels there for you as well. When you're at Muzdalifah, they'll have little parcels there for you as well. They'll give you gifts in Mina, and this is carried on up until today. It's been carrying on, and he was the Al-Qusay who had started this rifada. He had started this act of giving food to the pilgrims, and it has continued to this day in now what, 2017, and long may it continue. I mean, it's a provision we do when we go across to Saudi Arabia. You know, we moan a lot, we complain a lot, but you know, trying to meet the needs of around 2 and in some cases up to 4 million people over a period of 5-10 days is a monstrosity of a responsibility and an act. It's near impossible when you sit down and try to look at the logistics and how that can come about. How is it that you move such a large number of people from the airports over such a small period of time and then house them in hotels and, you know, with small roads where traffic is, you know, virtually at a standstill sometimes. And then this huge group of people, you know, large, talking millions here, are moving from Mecca to go to certain places, you know, Muzdalifah, Mina, Muzdalifah, Arafat, and then returning back to Mecca, and then obviously going for the Jamarat and going all to Medina. It's, you know, it's an incredible organization required. And yet, you know, bus comes an hour late and we're complaining, crying out loud, you know. Here in the streets of Bradford, the bus can come an hour late and it's only picking up 3 or 4 passengers. So can you imagine the scale that we're talking about? And, you know, food comes, you know, you order a takeaway, it can come half an hour, 45 minutes late. There you've got, you know, thousands, if not literally millions of people trying to get food, and all from the same areas. Of course it's going to be hectic. Of course it's going to be busy. No matter where you go, you've got to be prepared for waiting, for queuing. And you'd be surprised that as a community, as a country, Britain, known for its queuing, supposedly it's a British value. We should be used to it, but arguably, you know, we lose our temper more than most. So it's something to look at. So we see, for instance, then, you know, and as obviously this was later on, we see now the government of Saudi Arabia providing for this, which is the same as, you know, what was in the past when Islam was in the Arabian Peninsula, and that was the Baitul Mal, which was the general treasury, and this was spent to get food and drink for wayfarers arriving for the pilgrimage. And it's a reward. Obviously, it was done for the sake of reward, and it was done in order to make sure that this person will be looked after. Why is this person being looked after? You know, he's already got plenty of money. The reason why he's being looked after, because he is the guest of Allah. He is coming to the house of Allah, meaning obviously the word house of Allah, when it's referring to it like in that way, it means the honor which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given it. The honor is given it that he's associated his name with it. This is the honor that he's given this, and what he's saying is that these people are coming to worship me. These people are coming to the ancient house. They're coming here to remember the ritual rites that their forefathers, starting from Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, and that's what they're coming for. And they're coming to carry out certain ritual acts which they can't carry out anywhere else, which can only be carried out in this holy land. So I want them to be looked after. I want my guests to be well fed, to be nourished, to be given water to drink. Now, obviously, we've got money when we arrive there. We don't arrive without money. We've got access to credit cards. Even now on our phones, we can just beep them across screens and pay for food. Though this was a time where people were traveling from far, far away. Water obviously could only be carried on your back or on your animal, so you could only carry a certain amount of water. Food as well, there could only be a certain amount of food, and clearly food will go off, so you could only carry a certain amount of food or buy it along the way. And again, you could only carry a certain amount of money, and it would already cost you quite a lot of money to take time out from your work. With us, we can take 10 days off holiday or 15 days off work, which is paid as well. So so this was a time, but it's continued. We see it now, and we see it being continued up to this point where people, the pilgrims who arrive in Mecca, the pilgrims who arrive in Medina, are being looked after. And this is an act which he started. So as Qusay, who's brought these in, Qusay ibn Kilab, who's brought these new acts in, as he grew older and older, he entrusted these responsibilities that he had, that he'd enjoyed, to others. So basically, what was that? the leadership of Quraysh that he had, because he was a king now of Mecca, never mind amongst the Quraysh. The honor of governing the provision of food and water, like we've already mentioned, looking after the house, issuing the banners, and summoning assemblies, calling the chief leaders in as he chose. And he passed this on to his son Abd ad-Dar, and who was his eldest son. So you see here that Qusay ibn Kilab were instrumental in organizing a new role, a new power base, a new individual that never existed in the history of the Arabs, which he had brought about, and he had brought it about whilst he was the tribe of Quraysh. Now there's a reason for that. This is not coincidental. This is not just happened by chance that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was also from the tribe of Quraysh. And this is why the Quraysh in particular are highly regarded as people who should be leaders. In fact, it's mentioned that the Khulafa should always be from the Quraysh because they're natural born leaders. Leadership is something which is passed on through genealogy, from one father from one man to another man. And this is something, these skills and these naturally gifted talents that this person will possess, which, as we know, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would need when he would arrive, because he also became a leader that never ever and has never since arrived in the Arabian Peninsula. A man who brought tribes together that no one had brought together before. A man who had turned a group of people who were too busy killing each other into a single unit, becoming so powerful that it destroyed all the superpowers of the day. This was not by chance either. So he was picked from a very pure, highly regarded, intelligent, organized group of people. So when Qusay ibn Kilab became old, he handed over his responsibilities. He kept it within the Quraysh, and he handed those responsibilities over to his son Abd ad-Dar, and he was the eldest. And he looked after these because the others, the other sons that he had Abd Manaf and Abd Shams, and he had left them be. And Qusay obviously wanted to reach them in equality because his other sons had done quite well. Abd Manaf, Abd Shams, and they had already got some prestige and power within the community, so they were already highly regarded. So as a result, he wanted a little bit of respect for his eldest son, which was Abd ad-Dar, and he gave him this to look after. And Abd ad-Dar's brothers did not dispute with him the action that had taken place. They had no issue with it. They couldn't understand why their father had chosen Abd ad-Dar to hand this over to him, because they understood that they were already fairly powerful men, and this would give them quite a high level of power, yet their other brother had no authority whatsoever. But when they had all passed away, then their sons, obviously, as in the grandsons of Qusay ibn Kilab, had issues, and they would obviously then conflict was brought about. So you always see that the people who establish things rarely have conflict, but when they pass away and those who come after, and they're going to now inherit what's been left, you then start to see individuals fighting over what was left. So, and this is the point there is. They say Qusay only entrusted Abd ad-Dar with that to equalize with his brothers, and therefore we are entitled to what our fathers were due, and our fathers will never receive that. Now we've got some more to share with you in terms of what happened with Abd ad-Dar, and what happened with his, and when he took over, and how did this develop, and where does Abdul Muttalib fit into this, and where does Prophet Muhammad ﷺ fit into all of this. But as is the case when I reach this point, and you can tell by the way I'm winding things up, is that we've now reached the end of this episode as well. And we've left you at a point where we had introduced a new individual, a new role, a new title. We've seen now Darul Nadwa. We've seen now the banners having being produced by the Quraysh. The Quraysh is set up as an elite group of people led by a single individual, the person in charge of the family of Quraysh. It's becoming highly regarded. It's becoming very powerful. It's been able to exercise that power. And the one who brought that together was always undisputed. He was always unchallenged, because he is the one who is initiating it. But as he's passed on, and he's passed on to his son, then the brothers of this Abd ad-Dar were quite acceptable of what had happened, because they couldn't understand the reasoning. But when it got to the grandsons of Qusay ibn Malik, then this was Qusay ibn Kilab, then this became slightly problematic, until we started to see some disputes happening, and how Well, we need to find out, does Abdul Dar survive these challenges? Does he resolve his disputes? Does he do it amicably? Does he kill them? Well, that and for other questions and for us to carry on with our journey, you'll have to join me again in the next episode of Siratu Khatamin Nabiyyin, in which I can feel it now, I can taste it now. We're drawing closer and closer to the arrival of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and hopefully you can continue with me on this journey. I hope to see you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.